he's probably one of the most fun speakers I know. So I still laugh about the flying squirrel program that we did a couple of years ago. I told my husband I was going to it, and he's like, there aren't flying squirrels. But there are. But this year we asked Alonso to do a program focused on the monarch and the milkweed and that whole interrelationship. And he said, I've got this program that I'd really like to do called the Milkweed Safari. And who doesn't like a safari? So Alonso's here to take us on a little trip and teach us all about milkweed and the great creatures that inhabit it. And if you haven't gotten a chance to, we do have milkweed and the possibility of a safari patch right outside there. So feel free to buy plants before you go. All right, over to you, Alonso.
All righty, well, this thing warms up. Well, this is my son's computer, so...
So Alonso has to break the passcode.
Yeah, I'll turn it off. And the monarchs want to migrate already.
That's right.
So hold on one second. Like I said, unfortunately, I had to borrow my son's computer because it's a mishap of mine. I think I'm going to have to start from zero because I do not know what's happening. Yeah. We'll try this. There we go.
Oh, perfect.
What do you know? That's going to work. Do I need this? Do I need the microphone?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I heard that loud and clear. Okay. Well, folks, a couple of things. One, I am not a lepidopterist. I'm not a botanist. I'm a naturalist, so a jack of all trades. I enjoy kind of looking at nature, and I have a certain view of nature I'd like to pass on to you folks. The way I kind of see nature is that it's kind of like a puzzle. All right, it's a puzzle in that we know that there's all these different pieces that kind of go together, and not only we know they go together, but as a naturalist, one of the things I really like to do is to try to fit those pieces together. I'd love to find out what different things depend on each other. And as has been attributed, I guess, to Aldo Leopold, one of the first rules of intelligent tinkering, don't lose any of the pieces. And the bad news is we sort of been losing pieces for a while now, and that's kind of a sad thing. But there's another thing to puzzle building, and again, this is a lifelong puzzle. One of the beauties of being a naturalist is all my life I'm going to be able to go out there and learn new and new connections of how different pieces go together. And I love that. I will never solve the puzzle pieces, not all of them. But this lifelong learning, this lifelong quest, I think is one of the interesting things about being a naturalist. But there's something else about a puzzle, though. You can't take a piece from another puzzle where it fit perfectly well and shove it into an existing puzzle, because then other pieces don't fit. And I think we've been doing that a lot with all these exotic invasive plants and animals that we've introduced into stuff, and now things don't fit quite the way that they're supposed to. Well, what I'd like to do with you folks today is take one of those pieces of the puzzle, the milkweed, and kind of see all the different other puzzle pieces that are connected with it. Some exclusively, some passively, some just kind of one way or another. And I think it's going to be an interesting little thing, and I hope that by the end of this, you will have an opportunity to kind of see that actually it's more than just monarchs. All right, folks? There's a lot of things out there to benefit, even if you have a target species that you're really trying to help out. All right? So I'd like you to join me on a milkweed safari to go through. Some of the pictures are really good. Those aren't mine. Okay? The ones which are not so good, that if you don't have a title to them, those are probably mine. Okay? So we'll sort of see how it goes. So thank you very much, and let's continue on. First of all, let's talk about milkweeds in general. The genus of the main milkweed plant is Asclepias. And Asclepias, which is what most of your milkweed plants are, depending on which botanist you listen to, might be 150 of them in the United States. It's named after, again, a demigod, the son of Apollo and a nymph called Coronis. And the Asclepias, who was born of Coronis, apparently was taught by a centaur and all these great tricks, all of these wonderful things, and became such an incredible healer that a couple of things happened. One, became beloved of all the people, and some of his temples became actually the first hospitals according to mythology, because he asked that there be beds put in them and he would help take care of the people. The other piece of it was he actually supposedly figured out how to even bring people back from the dead. And the bad news about that was that the gods were not happy that he was able to do that. And especially when he started, apparently took some payment for that. He was struck down by a lightning bolt by the king of the gods, Zeus. And you know, there went that, and there went the way to heal, I guess, from death. But to this day, though, his scepter, he used to carry a scepter with a snake wrapped around it, became eventually converted over, and it became the caduceus, or the symbol for medicine nowadays, all right? And why do we name this whole group of plants after Asclepius? Because there's a ton of ways that plants, that Asclepius milkweed plants, have been used by people for medicine. And we'll also see for a lot of other things. But it's incredible, all the different attributes which were given to milkweed plants as far as medicine. So when we talk about the piece of the puzzle, and something I always like to try to emphasize, is it's easy sometimes to see the connections where the animal is connected to the plants. Let's not forget that we're part of the picture. For better or for worse, and a lot of times it's worse, we're part of the picture. And so we also had a close connection to things like milkweeds. So if you look at milkweeds, in Virginia, we got 13 different species, plus 4 vines, which are considered milkweed vines that are not Asclepius, okay? So these are them. I'm not going to go over all of them exactly, but just to give you an idea, this is what we have here in Virginia, all right? So this is what we have to work with that are native. Now, as most of you folks know, some of you folks might have planted non-native milkweeds, which also work as well. But let's focus on the natives. So when you talk about people using plants, you're really talking about something called ethnobotany, how people use plants. And milkweed plants have been used for a ton of stuff. Everything from medicine, which we of course already kind of hinted at, for food, that's a tricky one. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. Cordage, or making rope. In fact, some of the finest materials were made from certain different types of milkweed. There were favorites, of course. Paper making from the fibers, dyes, especially some of the Native American tribes. As filling, one of the things that was used for a long time for pillows and mattresses, because believe it or not, it's hyperallergenic. As sweetener, the flowers were collected before the morning dew was off them and were incredibly sweet, in particular common milkweed, which if people who have grown it, you can tell it's very, very sweet. And if you ever want to see something different, check out a common milkweed patch at night. Everyone checks out their garden during the day. Check it out at night and see what the night crowd is doing there. It's amazing too. All right? And again, different kinds of crafts, some simple, some not so much. And also natural rubber, latex, and used to be oiled from the seeds. As a matter of fact, some of the fluff was found to be not only very good for insulation, but in reality was also, when there was a shortage of K-Puck fiber during World War II, it became part of an industry. We actually made West. It was for life preserver jackets and so forth. So we're connected with milkweed. Still, people still experimenting with them, although now I guess the biggest benefits are for wildlife. All right? So, and again, the fibers have great insulation properties, but each plant, even though you might see a lot of plants, and even though you might see a lot of individual flowers, each flower head, very few of them actually get pollinated. And it's got to do with the tricks of how pollination works in milkweeds. So in reality, only 2 to 4% of the flowers form these pods, these follicles. And those are filled with all this fluff. And again, 2 bags of those were enough to make a life preserver way back when during World War II. All right? And of course, these are parachutes that carry the new milkweed plant to a new place, or hopefully it'll grow. Milkweed is called milkweed, of course, because of the milky substance inside. And that milky substance is sticky, it's latex, and it has cardioglycosides, which are things that affect animals' hearts. Okay? Basically, an animal doesn't eat too much because it'll affect their heart rate. And it's been used again for a lot of different things. Old folklore talks about eliminating warts by putting this stuff on there, and it'll actually eat away the warts. Liquid bandages. Somebody would have cut or whatever, this stuff would seal it together. So they made rubber out of it, all sorts of stuff. But I will mention one thing, though, that a lot of places do. They'll also talk about it, and it's this stuff you don't want to get into your eyes. And I've actually had know people who accidentally, been picking up stuff and, doing this and that, and then they accidentally and then when it gets in your eyes, very poor for you. In fact, it can cause some serious problems. So if you do deal with milkweed and all this and that, just be aware that's the protection from the plant, not just because it's got poisons in it, but because it's sticky. Some animals just can't chew through it, and don't make contact with your eyes. But of course, it's still a wonderful plant, and it is edible. Even though it's got carotenoids, ignore the fool eating it. I know a lot of people start thinking, well, why would you eat a poisonous plant? Well, in reality, several species, including common milkweed, which is the one they most talk about, when they first come up, believe it or not, are actually very sweet. They're pretty neat to eat. You just have to eat them before they really start to leaf out. This is already kind of getting past the stage where you can already see the leaves and stuff. But it's considered very edible, and people used to eat it all the time. So it is an edible plant. People used to not just use the sap for making sugar, not just used to fry up the pods, but you can just eat the sprouts, just straight up off the ground. And they're remarkably sweet. So yes, they have some protections in them, but the protections aren't infallible, and it is something that people used to do as well. Trick, I think, and the reason that some foragers, including people like Samuel Thayer, who's probably the best forager, best wild food experts around, as far as my opinion is, he thinks a lot of confusion comes from people confusing dogbane with milkweed. And one's fuzzy underneath and so forth. They both have a milky substance to it, but dogbane incredibly bitter, and milkweed not. But they are edible. But what we really wanted to talk about today was all the other things that use milkweed. And in a study done in Lewis and Clark Community College in Illinois, over a period of time, they checked out a milkweed patch, and lo and behold, they identified 450 different insect species. Now, not all of them were just on milkweed. Some were passing by, stopped by there, predators, scavengers, or other reasons to use it. But there's a ton of stuff in there, not including, of course, a ton of things that seek the nectar, very pollen rich. So over here, this is from Arlington. We got some swamp milkweed, and not only do we have, of course, the monarch, which is the symbol, of milkweed, as it were. But you also have things like hummingbird moths. You got all sorts of different kinds of things that will visit milkweed, and we're going to talk about a few of them. Just a few. Don't worry, we don't have time for 457. We will talk a little bit about a few of these different things. So let's start with the most iconic one, and that's of course the monarch. But there are 12 different caterpillar species that will use this. They're not all found over here, and there's a couple that will use milkweed, but we'll also use dogbane and stuff too. But again, this is the one most people think about. And here we have a monarch butterfly on a butterfly weed, okay, and a butterfly milkweed, or an orange butterfly flower. So many different names for it now. It all begins, of course, with our butterfly laying an egg, and what it does is it searches around a mental sight picture, lands on a plant, and it tastes the plant. For most butterflies, when they taste the plant, they actually taste it with their front legs, or what amounts to their front legs. Okay? They drum, they actually land on the plant, scrape it a little bit, and then they taste through their feet what's on there. When they taste it, if it's got cardioglycosides and other such things in there, I got the right plant, therefore I can lay an egg. And so after you lay the egg, it's pretty small. This one's actually on a non-native species. This is on a bloodflower. No, not a bloodflower, on a pumpball milkweed. But anyways, there's a little tiny egg right over here. Doesn't take very long. They oftentimes lay it underneath so it'll be protected from rain and stuff. And you end up then with a little tiny egg. Very soon it turns dark, and of course what comes out of there? You got the little caterpillar. First thing the caterpillar does is eat the eggshell. All right, very first meal, eats the eggshell, and then it starts to feed. Now that's a dangerous thing, a very dangerous thing, because as it starts eating, it may not be affected by the cardioglycosides, but it is affected by the stickiness. And believe it or not, about 30% in one study, 30% of the monarch caterpillars didn't make it because they got stuck by the milkweed. That stuff is sticky. Now, it wasn't used for liquid bandages and stuff like that, but it provides a physical barrier. Many insects who feed on milkweed have ways around it. They cut the veins so that they form like a little dam, and so it doesn't keep pushing out some of the latex out their way. But guess what? You do lose a few of the milkweed. It's kind of ironic, I think, that it needs the milkweed in order to reproduce, but that same milkweed is not completely defenseless, even when these things are adapted to it. But if it survives, you end up with a much larger, of course, it sheds its skin, you get bigger and bigger and bigger. And then, of course, a few generations later, it attaches itself to, like, I think it's called a cremaster, it attaches itself to some place to hang out. It's usually not on the milkweed plant itself. They go on a walkabout a lot of times. They go wander off, find a place nearby, and they set up, get ready to make their chrysalis. To make the chrysalis, it's absolutely beautiful, much better than this plastic thing, okay? And sometimes, I love the little ring around the top. But again, it's attached here, here's the cells, it's ready to go. That's actually not a wrapper, it's not a cocoon, it's its skin, okay? It sheds its skin, and this is one of the one of the sheds. This is the outside skin. All right. Right before it comes over, like 10 to 14 days, it kind of depends on temperature, you end up even being able to see the changes to happen inside. And of course, a little while later, you get the milkweed to pop on out of there. It sheds its skin for one final time, pumps fluids into its wings to pump them out. Fluids dry, it gets nice and strong, and you end up with the butterfly, the monarch that we're all kind of familiar with. All right, so like that, but not as fast. All right, so there you go. So anyways, there are other milkweed butterflies all around the world, but the ones that we have here in the United States include the soldier and the queen. And both of these, again, feed on milkweed that's young. And you can notice there is a similarity, of course, okay? And there's a similarity there, as there is a similarity between the viceroy and the monarch. All right? And that similarity, people used to study in school. What did they tell you? Oh, the viceroy is a mimic of the monarch, and so it gets protection because the monarch is saving some of the cardioglycosides. It's saving some of the toxins, and so by looking like the monarch, the viceroy now gets protection. Not that simple, all right? The reality of it is, viceroys feed on willows mostly, salix, that's the family, full of salicylic acid, same stuff in aspirin or derivative, okay? So they also taste bad, okay? And so it's the case more of not that this gets protection by looking like that, but they all get protection. Malarian mimicry, where all of these species get protection because a bird starts to realize there's a passamatic coloring, this warning coloration. This pattern, not good. Don't mess with it. It tastes bad. So schools still teach that. This guy mimics that. It's not so simple. They help each other out. They all have evolved to kind of look like each other. Bird tastes any of them, not going to be happy and isn't going to avoid them. Okay? And again, the viceroy is a little bit smaller. He has this little band across the back, okay? That's kind of a good way to identify him, which the monarch doesn't. By the way, this is a male monarch. You can see right here, see the little expanded points on the vein here? That's where he sends out different kinds of pheromones and stuff to the female. So this is a boy. And the caterpillar looks very, very different, okay? The caterpillar for viceroy, you know actually what it's meant to look like? Yeah, bird poop, that's right. And of course, what bird wants to eat bird poop? Tastes like bird poop, okay? All right. But there are other species that use it. And probably the most common one that you've probably seen is the milkweed tussock moth. Milkweed tussock moth is usually colonial, so it's a whole bunch of them. And they can strip the stuff on down. If, while they're eating, because I've actually seen monarchs lay their eggs where there's already a couple of milkweed tussock moths there, and they've eaten the leaf that the milkweed is on, that the monarch egg is on. So I suspect that they'll eat anything there, and if they don't eat the egg, they do eat the leaf underneath it, so it's gone. So they can strip the milkweed completely down. It's got the same, got warning coloring, plus as a tussock moth, it's got not only these hair tussocks, but these things come off, they're uncomfortable. Once they get inside the throat of an animal, a bird, birds don't like it, so hairy caterpillars, it's the whole idea about them. They're moths and the birds don't like it. And later on, you end up with with a moth, a very plain looking little thing like that, okay? Which again has to look for another milkweed plant in order to continue the thing. This is one of the things that its host plant, its caterpillar food, has to be milkweed. But there's a couple other ones that sometimes go on milkweed and sometimes don't. The most popular one, or most common one, is the Deletictignia, or sometimes the dog-bane tiger moth caterpillar. It's another fuzzy kind of caterpillar. It eats dogbane, which again has the milky latex and so forth, and is also toxic. However, it can also feed on milkweed. I think it actually prefers dogbane, but it can. Same with the unexpected cycnia, which I actually have never seen before, but is found in our area. Both the moths, once they come out, are an unusual looking little beast. They both look very similar to this. Tiger moths, so this includes all of your woolly bears, all those fuzzy guys, they turn into a very cool type of moth. Those moths have an interesting defense. They taste bad, okay? But not only they taste bad, but they have a way of advertising it. One is most of them are light colored. If you're at night, being orange and black, whatever, not going to show up, okay? White shows up. So white is a warning color at night. So this thing tastes bad. But even if somebody does try to eat it, it's got another way of advertising this. As you guys probably know, one of the biggest things that feed on moths at night, bats, right? So bats echolocate, and as they send the sound out, it bounces back from things. It also bounces back from the moths. Most moths have little ears, okay? And most moths, it's underneath their wings. Depending on where the ears are, you can tell what kind of family of moth it is. Anyway, so it hears the sound, and most moths then start doing all sorts of different zigzags or dive bombs, anything to evade the bat. They don't just sit there, get pinged by the bat, and just sit there and take it. They do try to get away. The tiger moths do something different, though. They not only try to get away, they click back. We can't hear it, but the bat can. And for a while there, people used to think, oh, they're jamming the bat. They're sending signals back. Actually, not the case. What they're doing is advertising, telling the bat, I taste nasty. Bat takes one, and every time now he hears the signal back, he's learned, okay, I don't even have to see it. That is not good for you. So it's kind of a neat little thing, and all tiger moths do it, and so do as our dog-named tiger moths and our unexpected cycnia moths. That was one of mine, right? Milkweed plants are magnets for all sorts of pollinators, you probably well know. Here's a swamp milkweed, and here's 1, 2, 3, 4 red-banded hair streaks on here. It's just amazing how many different things you sit there and watch a milkweed patch when it's in bloom, both day and night. Okay? You'd be amazed at how many different things come over and use it. So, next time you see a milkweed patch, check it on out. Anybody here do butterfly surveys? Okay. I know Joe does. Okay. Yeah. One of the favorite things, when you see a milkweed patch and it's in bloom, you go check it out. That is one of the hot spots for going to check out what butterflies are in the area. So there's lots of butterflies that use this. Here's dark eastern tiger swallowtail, and again, it's feeding on milkweed. You can see the pattern faintly through there. About half of the tiger swallowtails around here are dark. Okay, they mimic another toxic butterfly called the pipeline swallowtail. Okay, so about half of them get this dark color. So if you see a dark swallowtail, it might be one of these. Okay, but there's about 4 of them or so in our area. So this one's visiting here. It's got a big long proboscis, feeds in there, and it's just one of the other visitors. So is this guy. There's a spicebush swallowtail, and from the top, they look like a dark swallowtail. Again, it's another mimic of the pipeline, another toxic butterfly. But on the top, they have green up above their wings. Underneath, you usually look for this comet, this little, boy, this is my pointer giant, huh? But this little comet in here, that's a pretty good little sign if you can look at it. But it's another dark swallowtail, and swallowtails in particular, because they have long proboscis, look at that, big and long, they can get in there because milkweeds produce a ton of nectar. Enough that people notice that they would use it for sugar substitute, okay? So if people notice, the pollinators definitely notice. They come in and they visit it, but it's a tough thing, okay? In fact, I think I included it. No, I didn't. What they have to do is each flower head here has a bunch of nectar, but the pollen sacs are set up in just such a way that not everybody can get it, okay? And we'll see that a little bit later on, but this is a big, rich nectar source. So there's other things that are exclusive to milkweed. One of these is this nice, big, colorful little beetle, okay? And this beetle, here's 2 of them making more beetles. Milkweed borer beetles, they do hang around there, and their young are actually inside the milkweed, so you don't see them. But you do see the adults. Why? Well, they're big and colorful. Why are they big and colorful? Warning coloring. They also take in the toxins. They also taste nasty, so they tell the whole world, hey, don't mess with me. I taste bad. Same with this guy. They used to call them swamp milkweed beetles, but now they just call them milkweed leaf beetles because they feed on a ton of different things. See, this guy's already eaten through here, and this one's feeding on purple milkweed, another one of our natives. And again, the same warning colors. These are already out already. They're very small, and they're a big thing usually. If you get too close, they just drop. They drop down there, and then you don't see them. So they're there 1 second. Right after I snapped this picture, dropped on down. I couldn't find it in the duff. I couldn't find it underneath there. But they're cute little beetles, and again, exclusively feed on milkweed. So a lot of animals have figured out this piece of the puzzle. They're connected to the milkweed. They can use those toxins to their benefit. They have exclusivity because other things can't eat their food, and then they get protection by hijacking the toxins from the plant to then protect themselves, and they warn them with these similar colors. Here's another one. This one you can actually see that this is a weevil. Weevils are a type of beetle with a long feeding mandible, and guess what? Here it is. The milkweed's trying to protect itself, but it's feeding on there. These things can cause some significant damage to milkweed patties, so some people aren't real crazy when these guys take residence. But just yet another little tiny visitor that's dependent on milkweed. Dogbane, another one of my great pictures. These are very, very shiny type of things, and yes, they do prefer dogbane, which is related to milkweed, of course, but they also will feed on milkweed, and they're very, very common, very, very fast flying. Some people think that they also taste bad, and that the iridescence, the bright colors on them, is a warning. It's just not the typical red and black warning that we're used to. Anybody know what this is? You got them on rose bushes and everything else like that. Yeah, Japanese beetles. Japanese beetles, not native, and they don't like to feed on the foliage, which is what they usually do, but they love those big flower heads. Why? Not only do they get to eat the stuff, but there's tons of sweeteners in there, right? So they love to come in there. They got a sweet they got a sweet little mandible. They like to come in there and kind of pick them off. So flower heads in particular are really attractive to the Japanese beetles, and they love milkweed patches, especially common milkweed. It seems like common milkweed, either because it's so common, lots of people have studied it, or it's just got so much more sugar in it, so much sweeter, that a lot of things prefer it over the other types of milkweed. Okay, so here's a bug. Okay, and bugs are different from beetles in that their wings don't divide right down the back, they actually cross over, and all bugs have sucking mouth parts that they actually inject. Here it is, it's like a needle, it sticks it into the food that it's getting. So for naturalists, the usual trick to remembering it is bugs suck, okay? And there are such things as true bugs, and if it's a sucking insect, crossed wings, it's probably a bug. So bugs suck, and this one's sucking right out the developing follicle, the seed pod for milkweed. They can't feed on other parts of the plant, but they love to go to the seed pods, and you'll see tons of them. And again, it's got the warning color. This is the large milkweed bug, which is actually migratory. It gets too cold up here, they fly down south. These are ones that don't have to eat milkweed. People have figured out some other things that you can raise them so you can actually keep them in schools and study the way that they grow. They're even bright colored when they're young. Unlike the beetles that go through a complete metamorphosis, much like a butterfly where they go from egg to larva, these guys actually, they just get from a little bug to a bigger bug that just grows the wings a little bit more each time. But even when they're young, they still have the warning colors on them. And they're really colorful. I mean, they just warn the whole world, I don't taste good, all right, while they're feeding on here. And they, they do love to feed on these things. There's also much harder to find a small milkweed bug. It actually has an X across the back. It actually crosses over rather than, go back to the first one. See, it just has a band across the middle, okay? But the small milkweed bug, because small, I mean, you need two of them to compare them, right? It has an X across the back, right? That's another one. And then there's stuff that lives inside the leaves. You find one of these leaves, and it's been mined, all the inside has been eaten. There's actually a fly in there, a fly maggot, okay, a baby fly. But they actually feed inside there, completely sheltered, no rain's gonna bother them. Most animals don't know they're inside there. They're tiny, but they're living inside this great little world. So here is a silver-spotted skipper, one of our largest skipper that we have that's common around here. Got the long proboscis. It's going in there to get as much as it can, and while it's doing that, you know what's happening? It's picking up the pollen sacs from the milkweed. The pollen sacs are arranged in two little saddle-type things called pollinia. And the pollinia are right here. These are these things. And they actually are built to attach to big animals. So a big insect comes by, sticks it in there, and either gets it stuck on their leg when they stick their leg into this groove and pull out the little pollen thing, or what ends up happening, I've actually seen even butterflies have it stuck on their proboscis. But it pulls out the pollinia, and then when it goes over to the next milkweed plant, that's what happens. Don't forget that pollinating insects can learn. So bees and butterflies, if they go to a flower and they get rewarded, what do? They look for that same flower. That's really beneficial for the insect because guess what? He doesn't have to learn a new flower. It's really beneficial to the plant because guess what? The milkweed doesn't want its pollen to go to another kind of plant where it doesn't do any good. So they've evolved together. By getting rewarded, this other spotted skipper is going to say, I need to find another common milkweed. And instead of looking for an aster or looking for any other kind of flower, okay? They do learn, and that's why the insects follow each other. And if you're gardening for them, that's why you put patches of stuff. An isolated one here, there, and there is not as good as attracting pollinators as a patch of flowers, okay? That's just the way it kind of is. So it's fine for big things, like bumblebees and stuff, because they're big and strong, and so they slip their legs in there, no big deal. They pull up the pollen sac. It's like a little, they're like a little Pony Express rider. They got these little saddlebags on them, and they keep on going because you're big. But if you're small, that can be a problem because if you're a little sweat bee, a metallic sweat bee like this guy, and you're not strong enough to pull out this thing that attaches to your leg, guess what? You can get trapped, okay? And you sometimes find little carcasses trapped on there, either long enough so a predator catches them, or they just cannot come out of there. I've also found legs just kind of stuck out of there too. In their zest to get away, they leave something extra. Well, they got 6 of them, I guess. But anyway, it's amazing, but this happens more often than you'd think, okay? Again, it's not strong enough to pull out the pollen, it's not strong enough to free itself, and you end up with a trapped little beast like this. So, honeybees, which are not native, okay, they were introduced in, 1627, I think, back in Jamestown, so they are been in Virginia for a long, long time. They actually do love to visit milkweed flowers, but about 5% of them also get trapped, okay? So it's, so one out of every 20 visits is going to be a trapped little honeybee in there. So it's a tricky thing visiting these things. Sure, they got a ton of great nectar, they have a great reward, but sometimes it comes at a risk, all right? So there's other things too. Here, this is one of the climbing vines, honey vine. And on the bottom of the honey vine, here are all these oleander aphids, okay? They're brightly colored, again a warning thing. They're reproductive. These are the ones that are going to fly off and start another colony. They got wings on. And they, stick their little beaks in there and suck out the juices out of this thing. These are not native, but they adapted. The oleander apparently is close enough chemically to these things that they can use them. But there's actually several different species of aphids that have figured out that they can actually feed off of the juices of milkweed plants. But they got to be careful because things are hunting them. Sometimes it's native things and sometimes it's not. This is a non-native. This is the Asiatic ladybug. It has a little M on the back of his head. Anyway, these were brought over, and the bad news about this is, yes, it eats aphids, it eats all these other kinds of stuff, but you know what? It also eats other ladybugs. It competes with them. It eats some of the aphids that are not causing garden problems. I know that these are sold as biological controls. Bad idea as a biological control, okay? You release these things, it's non-native, it harms the native animals, and think about it. You put in a whole bunch of these, and the reason I use these is because they gather in big bunches, like in your house at winter, right? Okay. They gather them, so it's easy to shove them in their bag. You sell them, make a profit off of them. First thing that happens, if you don't prep the ground, if you don't do something to your plants, when they open up, they want to get away. So they go flying everywhere. So there's never enough of them to actually really make a difference around your house anyways. So they're experimenting with some of the native ladybugs, including the two-staffed ladybug. But again, I'm sorry, but a good idea, this biological control, good idea, but not in practice. They really can't harm the environment. They're not supposed to be here, all right? Again, that extra piece of the puzzle that shouldn't be there. But the insects do have ways of protecting themselves, including ants. Again, a crummy picture. Ants do tend the aphids, and what they end up doing is they protect them from things like ladybugs and stuff. And when they want to, they'll actually rub their antenna on top of the ant cow, the aphid. And what's the aphid do? It spits out a little bit of honeydew. He milks the aphid, and he actually gets a nice, rich reward for it. In return for this rich reward, that ant will protect that aphid from predators like that, which is a kind of neat thing. They'll do it not just with them, but they'll do it with other things like tree hoppers and buffalo hoppers. So here are some juvenile ones, but again, the ants, here they are, pending them. They're taking care of these things. So again, here's a nice little piece of the puzzle that's connected to even another piece of the puzzle. It's all little community. Here are more oleander aphids. I'm sorry about the quality of the picture, but anybody notice something on here? Right over here, sitting in the middle of all of them is a predator. If we were to get a little bit closer up, you find out he's got some big old jaws and he loves to eat them. This is the larva of a lacewing, and lacewings, along with milkweed, with ladybugs, and along with syrphid flies, flower flies, they love to eat aphids. Okay. Now, what I've done in the past, actually, my son, I'm glad actually helps with this because my eyes are getting old now. What does work great if you do have a problem with aphids is moving the larva. Larvae can't fly, okay? So you put them on there on a rich food source and they'll clean it out. I one time found this one little syrphid fly, and again, I wish I'd gotten a picture. You should have seen how much that thing ate. It just ate a ton. They're great, but again, because they don't have any wings, they got nowhere to go. And if you are looking in a garden and on your milkweed plant, you see this little string with a little thing on the end. Well, this little thing on the end is the egg for that lacewing, okay? So it attaches a little like wire and attaches the egg off to the top. Something that people think is that, so if something comes looking for it down here, it doesn't look up here and find the egg. But if you see these things hanging on the bottom of your plants, that's a good thing. Those are actually things that are going to help control, and not just on milkweeds, on any of your plants, to control some of the aphids and stuff. Other things, there's a ton of different kinds of leaf hoppers that also stick their little, little beaks in here and suck out all the juices of them. It's hard to find a milkweed plant that doesn't have leaf hoppers on there or aphids, okay? They love it. That's because there's so much juice inside these things. Other things, they just kind of wander through. Because milkweeds have so many hiding places, especially when the leaves close up, if you get a chance on your milkweeds at home or whatever, early in the morning especially, pull the leaf back very gently and see what's hiding inside. You might find a handsome trig, which is one of our crickets. You might find other things in there too. Lots of things hide. Slugs or European airways. Here, I pull the leaf away and here he is hiding, thinking nobody can see him. He eats both pollen as well as some other insects and stuff too. Again, he is not from around here. He's European. But again, the earwigs, tons of stuff. Slugs, almost so many things. Use the milkweed as a cover because it's got some thick leaves that can protect it. All right, anybody see what's in here? Yeah, that's right. There's a spider right here. It's a crab spider. And crab spiders, here's the body, here's the head, here's the legs, here's the little fang on it. Okay? This is a crab spider. Crab spiders can change colors. You'll see them in the fall a lot of times like goldenrods. But they sit there and they wait. And when a pollinator comes by, boom. So if you've seen a little butterfly and it's been hanging out at that butterfly, at your plant for a long, long time, not moving, well, could be him. Could be him. Here's a jumping spider with a silver-spotted skipper. Look how much bigger the skipper is than him. Yep. They're good at hunting there. So yes, it's a great place to find food, but it does come at a price, okay? There's lots of things that are hunting there because it's such a great habitat, because it's such an important piece of the puzzle. All right, that includes assassin bug. This poor little bee just didn't see it coming, right? So you get the idea. Actually, it's an assassin bug, and again, the assassin bugs have this long little injection-like hypodermic needle. They stick it in there, and they suck the little sucker dry. Remember, bugs suck, and assassin bugs does that. Okay, so here's a couple of the really, of the ones that we have right around here. Not all of them, but of course the most common one is the common milkweed, and because it's so common, and it is so common, one of the reasons because it spreads underground as well. You'll see a little patch, and that's why it's sometimes not great in gardens, but it is great for net restoration and for little efforts. It comes out, stretches out, and out pops up a brand new, another brand new little milkweed plant. Next, and probably much more popular, are the swamp milkweeds, which don't spread that way, but are very attractive. There's even some cultivated varieties now. They don't have to be in completely wet conditions. A wonderful, wonderful plant. And by the way, this was one of the favorites to use for cordage. This is one of the ones that has some of the strongest fibers and was one of the favorites that the native people would use for making rope and thread. Right? Oh, I did forget to mention, not only is the fibers used in this, but the fluff, okay? The fluff was actually mixed with wool and it supposedly made some incredible qualities. Very silky thread. So it was used for a while for thread as well. That very, very fine fiber, the fluff from inside the seed pods. All right, butterfly weed is probably the odd one out because, I mean, it just doesn't follow the same colors or anything else like that. Notice all the names are attributed to it, having to do with all of its different things. Pleurisy root because it was used medicinally so much, okay? Tuberosa because there's a big old tube-like little bottom to it, and that big old tube has been, the big tube root has been used medicinally by so many different tribes. If you were to look at a list of the different tribes that have used milkweeds, this is the milkweed that was used the most. Not just for cordage, not just for making rope, but medicinally more than any other one, okay? And really quickly, the pioneers and colonists learned from the native people that this could have some interesting medicinal roots. So there are actually dozens and dozens and dozens of tribes that use butterfly weed more than any other of the milkweeds for medicinal purposes. Purple milkweed is one of the prettiest ones. It's not as common out in the woods. It favors sometimes wet but well-drained areas, sandy areas as well, but it is very, very pretty. World milkweed is much shorter, is available very commercially, doesn't look like your typical milkweed, but it's a pretty cool little plant. Doesn't attract as many pollinators, but certainly a lot of the things that live on milkweed can also live on here, including our little monarch. Poke milkweed, also not easy to see, doesn't have as many flowers. There's only a couple of parts I know where this is around. Green or comet milkweed, this is a lot more shade tolerant. The flowers aren't very pretty at all. This one, unfortunately, the top's already broken off of it. Big type of things. Also edible, I know, because I tested a few of these things. So it's edible. The purple milkweed's edible. The swamp milkweed's edible. Right? I had to try it. What the heck? Okay. Four-leaf milkweed is the most shade tolerant. It's it's not very common, but it can live in the woods itself. And 4 leaves, it doesn't always have 4 leaves, but when they are, they're in a whorl, they're in a little circle around it. And it is one that's shade tolerant, which might have some good garden attributes. Because it's found in the shade so much, it's not one of the big monarch host plants, because the monarchs aren't flying to the woods as much, okay? But they can use it. And white or weathering, this one I've never seen actually out in the wild, but it is noted for being in all of our counties, okay? You've seen it here in Loudoun. But again, I have not seen it in the woods. I'd be very curious if people have. But, and I've actually tried to find it commercially, and I have not found a good place that sells it, unfortunately. And clasping, I've seen in 1 or 2 little tiny parks, clasping because the leaves go right up, right up around the stem itself. And again, that just shows you some of the very, very common milkweeds. We also have the honey vine, which is a vine, doesn't look anything like milkweed. And they call it a honey vine because when it's in bloom, the blooms are tiny, insignificant, but the smell that comes from them is remarkable. A very, very sweet smelling thing. And they'll be twining all around a lot of other stuff and just covered in all sorts of things. I've seen monarchs and stuff on there, but in particular, there's tons of other kinds of insects that find cover in and amongst the leaves of this thing because it wraps itself so tight around there. And then there's a couple of these milk vines. There's 3 different species of these in Virginia. These are the 2 that we have around here, okay? Again, they're not very, very common, but it just shows you that there's some of these different things. So, in conclusion, there are milkweeds all over, and again, I like to kind of look at the world as being a puzzle, okay? And I hope that perhaps you've had a chance to look at this one little piece of the puzzle, just the milkweed, and now you can kind of look at it in a different fashion. In your milkweed patch, which I'm sure all you guys have now, right? You got all the plants out there, right? You'll hopefully not just think about it, it just means something that, yes, benefits a very, very critical animal, okay? But when you're benefiting one, you will benefit so many more, okay? Don't think of plants and animals as living in exclusion of everything else. Everything has a place, and that place is usually connected to something else, all right? And I think that if you kind of think of the world in that way, if you're getting into looking into nature, you'll see all the natural connections are there. It makes it so much more interesting, and also makes you understand that when you do something for one thing, maybe the iconic species for milkweed, you are benefiting so many other things along the way, okay? By planting native plants because this is true, what I told you here about any of our natives. By planting it, you don't benefit just one single thing, but a ton. All right. So think about that when you're thinking about planting. It's not that I have anything against non-native plants or whatever, but if you have a choice, and if aesthetics is all you're going for, there are some beautiful, over 1,300 here in Loudoun, different species of plants that you can choose from. That's quite a few, okay? Surely there's a few of those that would fit in your garden that aren't just pretty to look at, but have a great value for something else as well, right? Now again, I'm not an expert, I'm just a naturalist, but if you guys have questions, I'll be happy to entertain your questions as best I can. It doesn't have to be specifically about these guys, but please. Anybody have some questions? Ah, well, good. That's the best kind of audience. So, one more thing. Again, when you're thinking about biological controls and stuff like that, there are a few that they're testing much more, but be really, really careful. And there are some non-native milkweeds which work, but if you can, pick one of the perennials, one of the natives, because it does affect some of the other species. Yes, sir.
Is there a milkweed animation that is diminishing milkweed?
Is there a milkweed enemy that's diminishing our milkweed? Well, again, some of the non-native stuff does affect them. The oleander aphids, which are not native, they tend to go to the juiciest part. The juiciest part's usually the forming little seed pod, okay? And they will suck them, they'll suck so much stuff out of them that a lot of times those become wilted and deformed and just don't produce as much stuff. Are they destroying them all? No. There are some concerns out there that some of the ways that we're practicing agriculture might be affecting the milkweeds. And I'm not going to get up on a soapbox and tell you that that Roundup Ready things are absolutely a bad thing, but I will say that there's a lot of support out there saying that when you do something and you affect this thing, you're affecting the other things around it as well. In this case, if you're doing something to the crops, you're affecting the things around it. All right? And that includes agriculture. Folks, going back to the many bees, there's over 400 species of bees here in Virginia, okay, that are native. 70% of them nest in the ground. So when we come through and we kill the ground, guess what we've just done? We've destroyed 70% of the bees that would be pollinating our things for us, okay? And so as we look at the plight of the honeybee, which is not native and so forth, let's not forget that there's plenty of stuff, native bees that were doing the work of the honeybee well before the honeybee showed up, that would be doing fine, but just by the simple practice of us not leaving hedgerows, of having all this clean area and tilling the ground so effectively, we're destroying the habitat for these things, which affects the pollination. Right, down the line. I saw another hand, I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am. Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Yes, of course. Of course.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt, I know this is much more interesting, but if anybody's interested in making final bids on our auction lots, we'll be taking bids for about another 10 minutes, and then we'll close it up and announce the winners. And I just wanted to point out that we have lowered the price on a few of the most expensive items. The Catoctin Creek Distilling Experience is now $50 instead of $100, and there are lots of other great deals still up here, so please take a look if you're interested. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
If you have a butterfly plant that's like almost literally covered with red.
Oh, the end. Yeah.
Yeah, we're like, deep.
Yeah.
Is that really bad for the plant? I mean, should you like maybe just remove some?
Well, the little aphids, those little aphids that crawl across, they're not native at all, and sometimes all it takes is just a good little.
Well, the other one, the black.
Oh, the milkweed bugs?
Yeah.
I've actually had discussions with other people, and what I've done well, I'm no longer at a nature center, but when I worked at a nature center in our gardens, I would allow them on the common milkweed, but on the things that I was trying to get established, I would remove them. I'd actually move them to the other thing. And remember, the milkweed bugs, till they're adults, they can't fly, so once you move them, they're not going to come back right away. So I'd actually move them. So for example, when I was trying to establish purple milkweed, all right, I wanted to get as many pods as I could. So I actually removed, got rid of the oleander aphids, but actually moved the milkweed bugs themselves and just put them over on the common milkweed. So they can affect how many seeds are actually produced, to be honest with you. Because they've evolved together, though, they're not going to eliminate it. It would take a ton of them to really permanently. Yeah. But again, if it gets to that point, you may want to remove them. It's true. I mean, that's probably an honest answer. Yeah. Anyone else? Well, folks, again, one last little shameless plug. Again, I am not a botanist or a lepidopterist, but I do have here something, another project that I've been working on. It's actually an identification book for the reptiles and amphibians here in Northern Virginia. It's actually a fundraiser for the nature centers that I'm involved with. I'm with Arlington County, okay? I'm their natural resources person. And it goes for $25. It's got every species that we have inside the Beltway. So you guys have most of the stuff that you guys have right here. You might have one extra salamander, maybe two, okay? But it's in here, and the money that's collected for it does go to our education efforts over in Arlington County. Believe it or not, Arlington County still has some great wildlife. Well, folks, if there are no other questions, I want to thank you very much. I'll be up here for a little while. I'm happy to talk with some other folks. I'm very happy that I was able to come and speak with you folks. I appreciate everything that the Loudoun Wildlife Conservancy does for the longest time, and I applaud all your efforts. We hear about it all over the place. It's not that you guys just do stuff here in Loudoun. We hear about it all over the region. I represent a lot of different people in my job, but for example, the National Association for Vegetation, the naturalists, and they hear about you guys, so that's a good thing. All right? Thank you very much. Well, you guys want to do crafts.